All right, good afternoon. My name is Landon Smith. I'll be talking to you today a little about the difference between minimum descent altitude and decision altitude for IFR flying. I'm just going to be working off PowerPoint and off Teams. Currently in Washington State right now on my honeymoon. So here we go. So we're talking about the trip a little bit first. As you can see, it says KPHF to Whiskey 75 or Hummel Field over to KFYJ West Point and back down to PHF. It's a pretty normal IFR training day or even VFR training day for private or commercial. PHF is just out of view on the bottom right hand part of the screen. So pretty easy track, ring route. About the pilot, that's me. 807 hours total time logged, 117 hours in type in Cessna 172, 15 hours logged solo, 37 hours logged instrument, and 75 hours logged as pilot in command. Aircraft, nothing fancy today. It's just going to be a Cessna 172 mic. Environment, so we'll say it's a good IFR training day, and ceilings are at 1,500 feet, overcast, smooth air all across the peninsula and Hampton Roads area. External pressures. Our external pressure will be that all the summer it's been relatively terrible weather, and it has been in real life. So we'll say that many of our flights have had to be canceled. So our pressure is to get up and flying with this flight and not drag our feet anymore. All right, so talking about the decision altitude, pretty much decision altitude is a expression that we use for precision approaches. So precision approaches include ILS approaches and LPVs for RNAV. So pretty much you configure for an LPV or an ILS once you have the glide slope come in. And so a decision altitude is pretty much you ride the descent into the minimum decision altitude, just the decision altitude, and at that point you have to decide whether you're going to go around or you're going to descend below for landing. So that's for decision altitude. We associate those with precision approaches. Next, we'll actually look at the approach plate here. This is the ILS or localizer into runway 25 into Newport News, which is my home airport, KPHF. And you can see kind of towards the bottom it says should say SILS 25. The decision altitude is 241, and I can't quite make that out, but it kind of looks like 3/4 of a mile for visibility. In the parentheses, you have the military visibility requirements. Going into talking about MDA, MDAs are minimum descent altitudes, which we associate with non-precision approaches. Non-precision approaches include VOR approaches, NDB approaches, non-directional beacon approaches, LNAV, in the form of RNAV, not as precise, localizer approaches, which is an ILS without the glide slope, and LDAs. So fundamental difference between an MDA and a decision altitude is that you can kind of hang out at MDA until you see what you're until you get to the misapproach point. Whereas with the decision altitude, once you're there, you have to decide whether you're going to put down or stay up. Now, going off the rubric, we talked about the time served approaches that use DA versus MDA. Consequences of treating an MDA like decision altitude. You may not acquire the runway visually ever if you just you get to MDA and then you don't see it, so you go around. So that's the whole point. You have to be able to like stabilize at the minimum descent altitude and kind of hang out there until you get to your misapproach point or until you see the runway environment. Consequences of treating an MDA like a DA, discuss the dangers of descending below MDA without visual references. All right, so problem with descending below MDA or below DA is that the whole purpose of an approach plate is for obstacle clearance and safety of flight. So I had a couple weeks ago, I flew with one of our pilots, and she said, "Oh, we'll get to the descent MDA, the minimum descent altitude, 10 miles out from the initial approach fix." It was obviously wrong. I mean, that whole time, if you're flying instruments, right? One, it's not a safe altitude. Um, it was like 700 feet. It's not a safe altitude. The approach plate notwithstanding, but the whole glide slope and the step downs in the approach plate, that's for obstacle avoidance, so that you don't fly into things and cause a CFIT accident. So besides that, you require a couple. There are 3 clauses that must be met before you descend below an MDA or decision altitude. And the aircraft has to be continually in a position from which a descent to a landing on the intended runway can be made at a normal rate of descent using normal maneuvers. So that means, like, if you're high, for say a circle to land, you can't slip it in. You can't chop all power immediately. You can't push the nose down into a 30-degree dive. All right. And the flight visibility has to be not less than prescribed for the standard instrument approach. So pretty much visibility minimums have to be met from the chart before you execute the approach. And then you need at least one of the following visual references for the intended runway, and it must be distinctly visible and identifiable to the pilot. These markings are the approach lighting system, the threshold markings, the threshold lights, the runway end identifier lights, or the rails, the visual glide slope indicator, the touchdown zone, or the touchdown zone markings, touchdown zone lights, the runway or runway markings, and then the runway lights. So that pretty much you got to have all 3 of those before you execute a descent from the MDA from the MDA or the DA to the runway. Otherwise, it's really dangerous. So that pretty much concludes my brief for today. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.